All right, so I guess that thing's working. Hi, my name is Jay, and I am an alcoholic.
Hey, Jay.
Come on. That's better. I would like to start off by saying thank you, Johnny. I believe that there are 4 great honors in Alcoholics Anonymous. If somebody asks you to sponsor them, if you get to give somebody a cake, if your group, if you get to do a service commitment to give back to the thing that saved your life, and speaking. So I would like to say thank you for giving me one of those 4 honors. We got to go through the whole disclaimer thing. My sobriety date is December 3rd, 1986. And if you just started going, I celebrated 35 years in December. You might look at me and go, well, everybody else I know that's 35 years sober looks like they're 3/4 dead, 90 years old. I actually came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous at age 15. Mommy and Daddy had gotten sick of me and shipped me off to rehab like everybody did in the 80s. And I got out and I came home and I was in a place much like this, except for where I got sober. Back when I got sober, we smoked. So like you couldn't see the back wall. And we still had the same cheap coffee with a powdered creamer, which I got to have every so often. You know, it makes it feel more real to me, you know. But I came into that meeting and I looked around and I was like, oh my God, these people are like my parents' age. Now, of course, at that time, my parents' age was like 40 and I'm past 40. So I was snubbing my nose at people that are younger than me today. But, you know, at 15, and I was the only young person that was sober in where I was. And I saw that I had some of the things that you guys talked about alcoholics having and doing, but I was just not, like I couldn't, I wasn't there yet, you know. So, you know, there was some good reason, I don't know, Mommy looked at me funny or didn't give me enough lunch money or some bullshit, and, you know, I had to go get drunk and high over that. And, I'm going to stop for a second. Just so you know, if you guys are used to those people that have 45 minutes of drunk log and get sober for the last 3 minutes, you ain't getting that tonight. The drunk log of a 13-year-old is not that entertaining. So we're going to skip that part. But it's important that I qualify because there is something that happened in that period from 15 to where I got here when I was 16. I started going to funerals. That started happening in my life, and it hadn't happened before then. And that doesn't earn you a seat in AA, but it was one of those, things are a little different now. And I went from being that happy little stoner kid with the flannel sitting on the green utility box, you know, that dude, that was me, I was that dude, to hanging out with people with automatic weapons and people finding bodies in dumpsters and that kind of thing going on. And that doesn't qualify you for a seat in AA, or any other A for that matter. But it was different. And what happened, what it is that I earned, how I earned my seat in here at age 16, is Mommy and Daddy came and got me from jail. Well, I say jail. I had been picked up, and I either got to go to jail or I got to go back to rehab. Not to rehab, but I got to get sober. And at that point, I was 16 years old, and I was as tall as I am now, and I weighed $120. And the prospects for a string bean in jail at 16 are not that promising. So I went, jail, sober, okay, we'll get sober. And I went back to Mommy and Daddy's house, except for this time I didn't get to go to rehab. I got to lay on Mommy and Daddy's floor, and I got to shake. And I had a little fluorescent desk lamp, kind of like this thing. And I sat there and I listened to Pink Floyd The Wall, and I shook for a couple of days. And while I was laying there on Mommy and Daddy's floor, shaking in what used to be my bedroom that turned into their storage unit, I had the very clear knowing, not hearing, not thinking, not maybe, knowing that if this doesn't stop, I'm a dead man. And not today, not right then, not in 20 minutes, like I was just going to keel over, but I knew the end of the road. Because in my family, my last name's Wood, woodmen die. Woodmen die in abandoned cars, in vacant lots, with livers the size of dogs. It's not woodmen don't go out gracefully. It's ugly and it's painful and it wreaks havoc on everybody. And that is my lineage. And I knew that, laying on mommy and daddy's floor shaking. And the very next thought in my head is I got no call as to whether I'm going to stop. Because in that period of time that after rehab, before I got drinking, and then while I was drinking and doing all the other fun stuff that we do, there were times where I could be blind drunk every day for a month and it didn't matter. But then something would come up. I'd have doctor, lawyer, judge, court, school, something, where I can't get drunk today. I can't do that. And I'd take that coin and I'd flip it and it would come up heads. And I'd be able to get through the day and not drink over whatever it was that was going on. And then by 5 o'clock that night, I could be just as blind drunk as I wanted, but I was able to get through the day. And a day, a week, a month later, something would come up, judge, lawyer, doctor, school, whatever. And I'd flip that coin and it comes up tails. And no matter how bad I want, no matter the reason, no matter the consequence, I'm drunk. And at 16, laying on mommy and daddy's floor, I knew that to my bones. I knew that to the core of my person, that is the truth. And that's what earns us a seat around here. That's what earned me a seat here at the leper colony with all of us happy lepers here. And with that knowledge, I was able to come in to AA and start doing this thing. And I was so lucky. My parents, you might have noticed from the sound of my voice, I'm not from around here. I'm from San Diego, born and raised out there. And my parents moved from one side of San Diego to the other. And where we moved happened right in that time where they'd found me, got me back from jail, whatever. And I went to a new high school, and there were sober kids. Like, oh my God, there were sober kids in my high school. There was like 8 of us. And we'd have an actual meeting at school. It was awesome. Of course, we're all brain dead and, go into class and we can't, I can barely pay attention to anything, much less, do chemistry or something stupid like that. But I had people. And when I moved up there, when I went to the meetings, there were young people. We actually had a whole young people's meeting. It was awesome. I didn't even know what to do with myself. And that thing started to happen. And the first relationship that happened in my life is I met, and I hope everybody gets to have this experience, where you may get your sponsor, you may find your sponsor, you may find that connection, you may find all that great stuff. But I hope that everybody in here finds that one person that ties them to us. That one person that just becomes your friend. Or maybe that one person who's just a little less of an a-hole than everybody else that you just cling to. I hope everybody gets to have that relationship. And I had that with a guy named Fraggle, was his nickname. And he was just this little dude, and he had, it was the 80s, so he had, the hair out to here. And he really needed some medication because he ran like 90 miles an hour constantly. And we just went and did sober stuff. He was a little older, so he had a job and some money and a car. And we would just go, man. We just went and did everything. And I had that first tie to you people. One of the, I can't say it's a bad thing. Obviously, it's not a bad thing. But one of the things about being sober for 35 years is I can't jam 35 years of sobriety into 45 minutes of talking. I just don't have that skill. So you're going to get some bits and pieces. And there's some things going on right now that seem appropriate to talk about. I was in a noon meeting Friday, and the readings were talking about God. Well, shockingly enough, our reading's talking about God. But it really, the meeting went into the understanding and kind of some third step stuff. And in my life in sobriety, that has been a big deal and very important. Because when I walked in here, I didn't have any church history or any religious upbringing. I went to church summer school for a week when I was like 6, and so I know Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and I'm lost from there. So that stuck for our church people. At least something stuck from then. And then when I was drinking and getting high, I had a friend of mine whose parents were Greek Orthodox, and they were a lot older than him. And what their strategy was for me, they had a strategy. Is they'd let their son be around me, and he'd get me into their house, and then they'd fill me up with food. Like an old Greek mom, man. She was just like jamming food down my throat, which was great, as a young, budding, pot-smoking, hungry all the time teenager. Fantastic strategy. So they'd fill me up with food so I couldn't run away too quickly. The food coma would set in, and then they'd drag me off to church. And that happened a couple of times, and they took me to this other odd, weird church. I don't know what was going on. And there were guys standing up at the podium. There was like the pastor dude and 2 dudes over here. And pastor dude had like some little bucket of God juice. I don't know what the hell it was. Some little God juice. And people were coming down, and he's and he's doing this on their forehead, and they're falling over. Oh my God, what is going on? And of course, I'm like 15, so I'm like, no, this is bullshit. So I march my little happy ass down there, and pastor dude gets out his little God juice and does this on my forehead, and the next thing I know, I'm looking up at people. Oh my God, get me out of here, freaked me out. My first ever spiritual experience. My second ever spiritual experience is I had another friend of mine, this was a little while later, who her dad was Native American and mom was Buddhist. So that was kind of a weird combo of humanity there. So she took me to the Buddhist temple. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. They're all, I'm a little stoner kid, I'm a little drinker kid, so they're all mellow and they're all into that. Got the incense going, so there's got to be some connection there. So they get me there, and I get gojikai'd, and I get my little Buddha beads, and I got my little Buddha scroll in a little Buddha box, and I got my little Buddha book. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but this stuff is in Sanskrit, which is not English. So I'm sitting there, and I'm being a good little Buddhist. You're supposed to play with your little beads, read your little Buddha book, your little Buddha scroll, and a little Buddha box. And I'm reading through here, and this word comes across that looks like chicken. Chicken. Stop, and my buddy just about pisses himself laughing. Like, oh my God, you're praying to the chicken god! Ah! And so that was it. Buddhist is done. Can't be Buddhist. That's what I walked in here with, people. That is the sum total of my spiritual experiences when I wander into AA. So when I come in here and I hear you guys talking about God and spirituality, I'm like, oh! Whoa, hey now. I've fallen over and I've prayed to the chicken god, and I don't know about this deal. But I know I'm a dead man if I don't. So that'll make you a little more pliable, You might have asked yourself, why did this dude just go through all of that craziness? What was the purpose of all of that? The purpose of all of that is in our book, when you get to that particular step, it says you can have any concept of God as long as, come on, somebody's read the book, as long as it makes sense to you. Right? So I come in here and I'm like, I don't know. And my first sponsor, my first ever sponsor was a guy named Gray Ray. And he was a limo driver, and he knew Ozzy, and he drove limos for all the bands in LA, so he had to be my sponsor. I mean, I'm 16. That's the guy, obviously, And everybody else is talking about, you got to be celibate for your first year, because that was the big thing out there back then. And just to recap, I'm 16. And Ray was like, let's stay out of relationships until you get your 4-step done. Because you'll learn more about yourself and you'll be able to be a better partner and a better boyfriend and a better that. And, my mom was a math teacher. And so I went, okay, if we're doing a step a week, that's 4 weeks. I can do that. I can keep the zipper up for a month. I can do that. As it turns out, no, I can't or couldn't. But, that was the goal. But I didn't understand God. I didn't understand any of this. I didn't have any experience. And I had 3 weeks or a month or however long it was of listening to you guys talk about it and be all excited or be all scared or whatever you were. And I went with Ray and we read that step and we got down physically on our knees and he held my hands and we read that prayer where I offer myself to you. And this thing happened. That happens to me every single time I talk about it, still to this day, 35 years later. There's goosebumps on my arm. Because I had that. I went, oh, this is what you guys are talking about. This is that thing. Oh. Okay. Okay. And I had that first just glimpse, just kind of looking around the corner, And it was that thing that made me want to stay and have what you guys have. It's that thing that went, oh, okay, I'll do something. Now, I don't want you guys to think that I'm some kind of spiritual giant and jumped in the steps and made it happen. I was willing to do anything you told me. If you said pick up ashtrays, clean coffee pots, put away the chairs, go be GSR, oh my God, stay away from the money, go do whatever, Absolutely, I'm down, But I went to enough of your meetings to where I heard you guys talking about that 4-step. And I went, oh, hey, oh, I'd come in here and I'd hear people talk about, oh my God, it's gut-wrenching, I'm going to die, and I'm writing all this down, and it has to be perfect, and I've been writing for 3.5 years, and And I went, oh, hey now, no, I think we'll stick with step 3. That was good. I like that one. We'll stay there. That's good stuff. Not really so much. I'm going to bounce around a little bit, and so I had that experience, but I didn't really have an understanding, and so I kind of pilfered bits and pieces of what you guys had, and that was fine. I stayed sober on that. I was sober for 2 years at this particular point, and I came home from work, and my parents had a roommate at that point. Dude moved into my bedroom in my parents' house. But he called and he said, Jay, you got to get to the hospital. Something's happened to Richie. Richie's my little brother. And thank God, I lived with 7 other sober people in a 4-bedroom house. Do the math. Bathroom was horrifying. But I had AA people I had known my entire sobriety, take me to the ER, where I found out that my little brother had been hit by a drunk driver. And I didn't know this at the time, but they have, if you're at the ER and something major happens, they have a room in the back because they want you around the humans that are there for, they cut off part of their finger. We don't want you guys mingling. So we're in this back room, and the doc, my parents were there, and my mom's freaking out and crying, and the guy who ran the rehab, my parents had become friends with him. And I remember my grandparents were there, and I hadn't seen my grandparents in years because there was some serious this going on. Not physical fighting, there just had. And the doc walked in, and he said, we did everything we could. What? What? And I watched my mom lose it. And it hits me what he just said. Now keep in mind, my understanding of God is just little bits and pieces of stuff that you guys have thrown out that I kind of super glue together and make some kind of nonsense out of. And boom, it comes down. And I was the last one in the room with my brother. And I'm the one who put the sheet over his head. And I took his hand, and I swore to him that I'll find the guy who did this and I will kill him. Not psychotic, not crazy, not yelling, jumping up and down, screaming, being a very calm, this person will die. I was lucky enough that I was immersed in AA at that point. And so my house is nothing but sober alcoholics. My parents are in Al-Anon, so there's people that are immediately there now. Shit is going on now. And I get to my parents' house for a little bit, and thank God the only thing in my head is I got to get to a meeting. And I walked in, and it was a speakers meeting much like this. Oops, sorry about that. And people had known what happened, and we used to have the main speaker and a little 5-minute speaker beforehand, and they pulled me up, and the only thing I can get out of my mouth is my brother's dead. I don't want to drink, and I don't know what to do. As is normal in most meetings, there'll be the greeting line where you come and shake the speaker's hands. And every single one of the people in that meeting came to me. Because that's what we do. And the people of Alcoholics Anonymous carried me. You might have picked up I hadn't worked my steps yet, so I didn't have that thing that will keep it together for you. I didn't have a clear understanding of any kind of functional God. I had you. And you saved my life. No maybe, no could be, no, it saved my life. And for a long period of time, you guys carried me. And I got through that. I got sober. I did not drink. I stayed sober through it. I walked through. I grew. I married the girl I had been dating at that point and had a life, and learned how to take that experience and learn one of the magical things around here. Things that happen to us that look like the most horrific thing in the world eventually will become useful as one of God's tools. Our book talks about that. We won't wish to shut the door, and we'll see how, I don't know. Somebody reads the book around here. You know what I'm talking about. You'll find it in there. And that's what happened. A number of years later, my wife and I, we moved. We were living in Cincinnati. And, my wife, all she wanted from day one is, I want to have babies. I want to have a family. I want to be married, have kids, have a family. I don't care about money, house, job. I don't care about all that shit. I just want to have a family. And while we were still in San Diego, she'd gotten pregnant. And ladies, you know what this is. Guys, you don't. Most of you guys don't. She had an ectopic pregnancy, which for the boys in the room means you have a baby in your tube, not where it's supposed to be, which is the belly, if you're not sure how that anatomy works. It's in the hirular region. And so she had surgery, and that was done. And we got through that. My sponsors taught me a lot of stuff about what it means to be a husband in that period of time, and what it means to be a sober man in that period of time. And we eventually moved and went to Kentucky. And then, in that first time, we had to go to the fertility specialist. There was turkey basters and dope and having to go to the doctors at 2 a.m. Oh, it was just horrible with it, dude. It was horrible. And we moved to Kentucky, and I get her pregnant all by myself with just me and Kentucky water. It was awesome. Look at me. And we go to the baby doctor, and they break out the magic wand and the baby goo that they spray on you, and ectopic pregnancy number 2. Except for there, we don't have all of our support like we had back home. We'd only been in Kentucky for a little while. And a little piece of my wife starts to break. In that time, we had been going to meetings, and when we moved to Kentucky, I had a job waiting for, which was cool. I like to eat. I'm a fan. But we prayed about it. We both felt like we needed to go that way. We don't know what it is, but something says just go that way. The job's nice. We got someplace to end up, and we got a paycheck, but we need to go that way. Because let me tell you, I came home one day, and I went, San Diego? Kentucky. Kentucky's not usually going to win that fight, you know. But we prayed, and something said go that way. And we were at a meeting, much like this, and we were talking to people, and there was a, you know, as there is in most AA meetings, there's some chick who's pregnant. You know. And so we made friends, you know, whatever. And we'd been there for a little bit, and she had something happen, and she had her baby at 25 weeks. And she had a family set up to adopt it. Everything was cool, all good to go. And when they saw a 25-week baby, they said we did not sign up for that. And so if you don't know what a 25-week baby looks like, Emily was 1 pound and 9 ounces, and she would fit head here and feet dangle there. I eat sandwiches bigger than that. And she came to us and she said, guys, would you think about adopting my baby? I can't keep her. I can't do it. She knew she wasn't ready. She already had an adoptive family set up, and they backed out. And she said, would you guys? And we went, whoa, because what you guys have taught us is just because it sounds like a great idea, you better calm down and pray about it for a little bit. If you haven't heard that before, let me be the first. If it sounds like a great idea, stop and pray about it for a little bit. And so we did. And you know what the answer was. Except for it wasn't that easy, you know. We had been in Kentucky for 9 months, and so my closest friend in AA, the closest person I've known out there, I've known you for 9 months. And I had to go to Greg and go, you know what? She's going to be okay. They're going to let her come home from the hospital. This was down the road a ways. Will you let us stay in your basement? Because we hadn't been there for a year. We couldn't bring her home, and she was going to go home with mom, and it was going to be done. And what did he say? Of course you can. That child was very, very sick, as you might guess, from something that big to start off with. And the doctors told us she's never going to walk, she's never going to talk, she's going to be blind, she's going to be deaf, she's not going to, her lungs aren't developed, she's not going to live anyways, don't get attached. There's a happy prognosis for you. And the lawyers and the social workers said, why are you doing this? You can't have her. You haven't been in the state for a year. You cannot. And the nurses said, just come and love the baby. So nurses out there, just come and love the baby, which is what we did. And Emily is 26 years old now. But in that first couple of years, she was sick as sick could be. We were in the span of 2 years, we were in the hospital for a week at a time, not just kind of passing through. We were in the hospital 5 times in the 2 years after we got her home. After her spending 3.5 months in the hospital after birth. And one of these nights, we're at the hospital, and Emily's in there, and the doc's like, her oxygen levels are not good. Her lips are turning blue, And Emily's up there. And over here is my wife, who just had her 3rd ectopic pregnancy. And they carved out most of her goodies, and they said, game over, it's done. You will never, ever have this. And I remember standing in front of the hospital, It's raining buckets, and if God was there, I would have punched him in the mouth. How could you, after letting this child live for 2 years, let this happen? And how this woman who was a better AA member than me, was a better sponsor, was a better AA member, was a better wife than I was a husband, all of these things better than me, and all she wants to do is have kids and love them, and you let this happen. How? And I couldn't get my head around it. You remember that you can have any God provided it makes sense to you? God didn't make sense anymore. If he was there, I would have punched him. It would have been on. But I'm sober. And it's kind of hard to do sober and know God. If you've ever tried that particular game, it's not very fun. And it scared me. Because now after I have that moment of temper tantrum or whatever, I pray and I don't feel anything anymore. It's dark. And I go to you guys because that's what I know to do. Because you guys saved me multiple times before. And you'd say, Jay, go do this, go do this, go do the other, go to clean up chairs, go wash ashtrays, go talk to newcomers. No, maybe you should stay away from the newcomers. We don't want them hearing you right now. And I by that time, I had all my steps done. And I did what you did. I found a Catholic priest in AA who was sober to be my sponsor. I went to any length to find God and rekindle that, and I couldn't. It was dark. And I got scared. So I have an older daughter, and she lived in Virginia with her mom, and we'd gone out on a trip and took Emily's the little one, took her with us to see her sister, and on the way back, my wife and I are having that conversation. You know that conversation that I think we're freaking done because you're a nut job, and you're miserable, and you're killing us, and I think we're about done. And in the midst of that gut-wrenching conversation as we're driving across country, because of course, you don't have that in your kitchen. You have that when you're trapped in a car for 7 hours, The DJ comes on and he goes, oh, hey, the new song from the Counting Crows is coming up. And in the midst of our gut-wrenching conversation, we had to stop because, we love the Crows. It's one of our favorite bands. And it's a song called Long December. And one of the choruses says, if you think I could be forgiven, I wish you would. And I start cracking. And the next one says, if you're thinking about coming to California, I think you should. And I went, there's my answer. Honey, I got to go home. I'm going to die if I stay here. I'm going to drink. I'm going to blow my head off. I'm going to die. I got to go home. And I did. And we packed up our stuff and we moved. We had jobs. We had everything. We moved back home. And I got home and I got back my old sponsor, Jim. And I got with my best friends that I had from day one in sobriety. And people that I've known my whole sober life. Back at the same meetings, the same home group doing that thing. And it's dark. And going home don't fix it. And now I get a little more scared. So I do that last thing that any good drunk does. Okay, I'll go see a shrink. So I go to the shrink and he says, wow, Jay, are you thinking about killing yourself? I think, duh, why the hell did I think of that? I won't fix this shit, right? And he goes, Jay, you're about a half a step from me having you committed. Now, at this point, people, I got double-digit sobriety. I'm about 11, 12 years sober at this point. He says, I'm about ready to commit you. Take these. Now, I want to make sure that everyone here hears this clearly. This is not some talk against taking head meds. In fact, that's currently the field that I'm going to school to be in. Not what I am saying. But he gave me those things, and it got darker. Because now I have gone to the last-ditch effort, and I'm doing what he says to do, and it's getting worse. It's getting a little dark. My toes are hanging over the cliff, and I don't know. I am out of options. I don't know what to do. I've done everything you knuckleheads have told me to do. I'm now going to see a shrink, and he's putting pills in me, and they ain't doing a damn thing. And then the miracle happens. Because what I had heard from you people forever is don't quit before the miracle happens. And I wasn't going to blow my head off. I knew I wasn't going to, even though it sounded like a good idea at the time. A friend of mine named Linda, that I'd known from day one sober, says, "Oh my God, Jay, you got to hear this. You got to hear this tape. It's awesome." Used to listen to the tapes. For those of you who don't know, they're these plastic things with actual tape in it. You put it in this thing in your car that cars don't have anymore. But so she gives me this tape of a guy named Tom Brady Jr. And I use his whole name because he's at the big meeting in the sky, and I don't think he'll mind anymore. And a man that I've never met saved my life. I listen to this guy's talk 3, 4, 5 times a week for months. Like I could recite it to you word for word. I've listened to it so much. And it was a talk he did on a thing called emotional sobriety. It's in the Language of the Heart book. If we got one of those floating around here, it's on page 236, if I remember correctly. And it's a story about Bill talking to another old-timer about what do we do when this stuff stops working. We got to figure out how to put it back together again. I had that pinprick hole of hope open up in my life from hearing that guy's story. And it saved my life. I've spent most of my sobriety, more than half of my sobriety now, filling my life with those things, so the things that are in that particular talk, the things that we do to get through. Please don't hear it's something to do aside from the steps or aside from AA and meetings. It's not. It's Bill talking about some next level kind of stuff. And I would not be here today if I didn't get that tape. I have no doubt in my mind. And that guy, somebody said his name a minute ago, that guy was from Charlotte. And so when we move out here to North Carolina, we drive through Charlotte, and I live about 45 minutes outside of Charlotte. For a guy whose hand I never got to shake because he died before I got here. But that man means as much to me as any other man I've ever met. You may wonder, how does all of this come back together? You started once upon a time talking about, you have any kind of God you want as long as it makes sense to you. Because my understanding of God and his universe needed to change, because the understanding I had may have worked at one point, but did not work now. And I didn't know you could read. I thought it was like you got sober and you do step 3 and you like make your job description for God and that's it. And that's not been my experience. My life has been different. My understanding has been different. And it's not that I think God has changed any. It's that I'm able to see a little farther. You know, I have perfect 20/20 vision through this straw I have. I can't see shit out here. You know. Then as it opens up a little more, I get to see a little more, and I think what happens is I get to understand a little more of what God does, and how this whole game plays out. And my understanding needed to change. I could not live with the God that would allow a child to go through that kind of torment and one of his other big children to go through that kind of torment and be okay with it. So I had to change what I understood. And what that meant is I had to look outside of here at some things that I never thought would have made any sense. Like there's some of my spiritual understanding right now that comes from a rabbi. Other than the part of Jewish people, their name comes from wrestling with God, which Lord knows I've done plenty of. That Jewish rabbi opened up my picture of what it means, of how God works. From a book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. If you've never read it, God, I hope you do, if you get to this point. There's some other things. There's another book from a guy that's not AA stuff, from a man who went through a concentration camp, had the tattoos to prove it, and then created a whole thought of psychology based on what he learned about how it is that people lived through that experience and why it is that people didn't. And that guy's name is Viktor Frankl. And that book is about man's search for meaning, I remember. Let me tell you, I was searching for some meaning. But the great thing about all of this other stuff out there is it meshed perfectly well with what we're doing in here. It all fits in here. If you can't see, I'm tapping on the big book. It all fits in that. None of that stuff, I think anything that's really, truly spiritual and God-inspired or God-touched will fit with this, because that was, I think. And so if you're in here and you go, the religion of my childhood does not work anymore, I can't live in that anymore, you don't have to. You don't have to. And if you're in here and you go, all of this nonsense I've been doing my whole life doesn't work, I need to get back to what I had when I was 6 in that church preschool daycare thing for summer school, you can. And that will work. And it not will work. It does work. Because I believe my job and our job collectively around here is to be part of that conduit that gets you hooked up with God. That in sponsoring and working steps and doing what I do, I am nothing more than a really good waiter. If you go to a high-end restaurant, you're going to have a waiter that kicks ass. He's going to have that little white apron thing going on, and everything's going to be perfect, and there's not going to be any boogers on your spoons, and the water's going to be clear, and it's going to be right, and it's going to be rock star, and it's going to be perfect, because that's what that dude does. That is his function. That's my function. My job is to set the table and create the space for God to come and do what he does. God, I don't do shit. I don't make that happen. I set the table. And I think it is important to be a good waiter, to be a good steward, to take pride, to define what that is that makes you the good waiter, so you don't screw up God's meal as it's coming out from the kitchen. That's what we bring. That's what has been given to me. That's what I have been graced with time after time after time from you people. Even half the time when you don't even know you're doing it. I'm kind of half blind. I can't quite see. It looks like it's about 10 till. Are you around there? 5 till? So that means I was done 5 minutes ago? Awesome. One thing I hope, I heard that we had some new people in here. You don't necessarily need to be in your first 30 days for this to apply, but I hope that every single person in AA has this read to them by somebody who believes it. It's one thing to read a book of something and you go, yeah, maybe. I believe this thing with all of my heart and soul. And it starts on page 84. And it says, and now we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time, sanity will have returned. Period. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. Period. We will see that our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. Exclamation point. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. Period. It does not exist for us. Period. If that sounds like something that you want in your life, do that. This is a textbook made to teach you how to do and how to get something. If you do that, that comes. If you don't have that experience, that's okay. Because there are enough of us around here who have been sober for more than 20 minutes who will tell you this is it. Do I worry about walking down the beer aisle at Walmart? No. No. Do I have to worry about that? No. The problem has been removed. If that's what you want, this is what you do. Thank you for giving me a little bit of your time.